Well, hello again everybody and welcome to another episode of Xenography, and this week on the show we're going to be having a look at two very powerful, very capable, very innovative and very likeable mirrorless cameras. That's the Fujifilm X-T1 here and its successor, the Fujifilm X-T2. Both of these are older cameras, neither is in the first flush of youth. The X-T1 came out in 2014 and the X-T2 in 2016 as far as I understand it. So neither is a new camera, but they both represent very significant bargains on the used market, and if you're looking for a used mirrorless camera, either of these, depending on your requirements, is a great place to start. So we're going to have a closer look at both of them today and just try and tease out what the strengths and weaknesses of each are. So without further ado, let's check them out. Both of these cameras make very beautiful JPEGs thanks to Fujifilm's film simulations, and if you're a photographer who's used to shooting RAW and then processing those RAW files to your taste, tuning them to your visual taste, I found you just don't need to do that with these cameras. The JPEGs out of these cameras are so beautiful, so nice looking, so finely finished that they really don't need any post-production at all. Straight out of camera JPEGs are absolutely fantastic from these cameras. You do have to shoot in one of the film simulations if you're shooting in JPEG. If you're shooting RAW, you can take that RAW file and apply any of the film simulations to it. So you can play around there to your heart's content and produce as many different versions as you want. So these really are very versatile and very unique little cameras. These are both fairly small cameras, as is in the nature of mirrorless cameras. They're broadly similar in size to each other with minor differences that I'll go into in a moment. They're probably both just slightly bigger than a Sony A7, and they are just that little bit bigger than the Panasonic GH2 I'm filming with over here. So let's just compare them for dimensions, back to back as it were, or side to side. And you can see there that the X-T1, which is this camera, is pretty much the same size as the X-T2 in most dimensions. I wonder if the X-T2 is a little wider. So can we see there? Again, they're about the same in width. I think the X-T2 might be just very slightly wider, but there certainly isn't much in it. One dimension where they are different actually is in depth. That's this dimension here. The X-T2 is slightly deeper, and as a result its grip is slightly larger, which I must say is an advantage, because the X-T1 does have quite a small grip. I have actually fairly small hands, but even I find that the grip on the X-T1 is it just could do with being a little bit bigger, and the X-T2 gives you that. It is that bit easier to hold. I've not really had any problems with it, but certainly larger is better in the grip department. They've got the same colour film simulations, but the black and white simulations are different. The X-T1 has a monochrome setting and then 3 more monochrome settings, one with a green virtual filter, one with a red virtual filter, and one with a red virtual filter. So on the X-T1, the black and whites are not a film simulation. They're not modelled on any Fujifilm that I know of anyway. They're just straightforward monochrome. Now, when I reviewed the X-T1's monochrome files a few weeks ago, I did a review on the X-T1, and on the whole I didn't think those black and whites were quite as successful as the colour ones in the X-T1. they seemed to lack a little contrast. They seemed a bit insubstantial. I've since discovered you can get a more punchy look by adjusting the shadows and highlights. You can really kick those up and get some very punchy black and white images out of the X-T1. But the X-T2 has a dedicated Fujifilm simulation, and that is Fuji Acros film, and those images really are quite punchy. They really are pumped up. They've really got plenty of body and the scope for punching them up even more. You can increase the shadows, you can increase the highlights, you can play around and cook to your heart's content. On the whole, the monochrome on the X-T1, on the X-T2 is just that little better than that on the X-T1. So that Acros film sim is a very nice feature to have in the X-T2. It wouldn't be a deal breaker for me if I was considering one of these two cameras. You can get nice black and white from the X-T1, but it's much nicer from the X-T2. If you shoot a lot of black and white, that could be an important factor for you. They do have a different sensor. Both are APS-C sized sensors. The X-T1 has an X-Trans 2 sensor with 16 megapixels, which is more than enough resolution for almost all of us, unless you really are blowing those prints up to enormous proportions. 16 megs is entirely adequate, in fact more than adequate. The X-T2 has a bump up in resolution to 24 megapixels and it has an X-Trans 3 sensor, so the images do look a little bit different. The X-T2 files are that bit stronger, that bit more punchy. They've got a little more contrast and they feel a little more, I don't know, serious somehow, whereas those from the X-T1 do feel more delicate. They have a more delicate feel. They feel lighter somehow, if that makes sense. There is a subtle difference between the images, between the look of the images that these two cameras make. Both cameras, however, make fantastic images and both can be adjusted to suit your taste. I must admit though that personally I marginally prefer the images from the X-T1. I think they are just that little bit nicer, though the difference is not great, and I certainly wouldn't reject images from the X-T2. The greater resolution of the X-T2 though does give you that bit more resolution to play with, so you've got more to work with if you want to crop your images. That's a little more difficult with the X-T1, and you won't be able to crop quite as much before you begin to see a drop in resolution. As far as autofocus goes, the X-T2 here is said to be slightly faster, and I'm sure it is, but they both seem pretty quick to focus to me. I've not really had any problems with either. I'm sure if you went to the trouble of doing very tight measurements, the X-T2 would be a bit quicker, but I can't really see much in it in everyday use. That is in single mode shooting at least. In continuous mode it's a very different story, and there the X-T1 does seem to struggle, and it struggles significantly, at least it did on my tests anyway. I noticed it most on video. I've recently been looking for a better way to shoot these videos using a newer camera with a good autofocus system. So I kind of tested out both. The X-T2 found and held focus very quickly, pretty much immediately actually. There were almost no problems, almost no racking back and forth, a tiny blip here and there, but really nothing to speak of. And I can stick this camera on a tripod, point it at myself, set it to continuous autofocus, and I know it's going to work. There were one or two very minor wobbles where it racked a little bit, but nothing really to speak of. Overall, it was entirely acceptable, very usable footage. But when I tried the same test with the X-T1, same lens, same position, same shot, it really struggled, and it continuously, well, you can see here, it continuously racked back and forth, struggling for focus. It constantly hunted, and it just couldn't find the right focus point. It would find focus occasionally, hold focus for a minute or two, but a slight movement, any slight movement that I made, knocked it out and sent it hunting for focus again. So for video on continuous focus, the X-T2 is by far the superior camera. And in fact, even when it did find focus, the video from the X-T1, I shot both of them in 1080, 24 frames a second. The video from the X-T1 just didn't seem as nice. The video from the X-T2 is far nicer, and it shoots in 4K as well. So if you shoot a lot of video, if you're looking for a capable, competent video camera that, you know, will really cut it with, even against modern cameras, some of them, the X-T2 is definitely the one to go for. If you're looking for a good video camera, don't buy the X-T1, because it's really not that great for video. Wonderful at stills, video is not its forte. When it comes to card slots, the X-T2 here has plenty to boast about, because it has two card slots, two SD card slots, as against the X-T1's one SD card slot. I don't suppose it makes a huge difference, but it is nice to have it there, especially as you can configure them to do all sorts of different things and record all sorts of different ways. For example, they can record consecutively, so that when one card fills up, the other one begins to fill up. Or they can both record the same footage or image on each card, so you've got a backup in case one of them goes wrong. In my experience, I probably shouldn't tempt fate, but in my experience they don't go wrong that much. So I don't think this is a, you know, again, a deal breaker scenario, but it's definitely more useful to have two cards, so another win for the X-T1 in the card department. So which of these little beauties, and they are both little beauties, which do I prefer? Well, they're both fantastic cameras, that's the truth of it, and they both can make some very beautiful images. Both have an innovative approach to digital photography. Specification alone suggests that perhaps the X-T2 is the better camera. It is a more modern camera, and it does have significantly higher resolution in its stills images. It has dual card slots, and it does very much nicer video. But specs alone don't tell the whole story. This little X-T1 is a very beautiful little camera. I can't help liking it, and I think on the whole I probably like it that bit better than I do the X-T2. It's not quite as capable, but I think it's that bit more likeable. I like its smaller size, I like its lightweight, and I do marginally prefer its straight out of camera JPEGs too. However, for my purposes, which is to have a good APS-C camera to shoot stills on for the channel, and a good video camera to shoot the episodes for the channel, for my purposes, the X-T2 has to be the winner here. But if you're just looking for a really powerful, capable mirrorless camera that can shoot very beautiful JPEGs that I do marginally prefer, actually, and I've heard a lot of other people say that too, then the X-T1 really should be the camera for you, especially if you don't want to shoot much video. As a stills camera, this one really takes some beating. As far as price goes, both of these cameras are absolute killer bargains at the moment. The X-T1 body only will cost you £250 to £300 in absolutely tip-top mint order. They are real bargains just at the moment. The X-T2 is also an incredible bargain, and because of its higher specification, it's probably the better bargain in terms of bang for your buck. X-T2s are available in good condition, mint condition, for around about £400 to £450. So both of these cameras are absolute bargains just at the moment, and if you want a great stills camera, the X-T1 will fill that gap absolutely perfectly, and you will not notice the difference between this one and a modern camera. If you want a fantastic stills camera that's also a fantastic video camera, the X-T2 fits the bill perfectly. Again, you will not notice any difference compared to a modern camera. Both of these are absolute bargains, and if you try either one of them, I don't think you'll be disappointed. So there we are, two beautiful little cameras. Both make fantastic images, both shoot vintage lenses, both are really nice, really innovative, beautifully made, carefully designed machines. Which is right for you? Well, I hope this little comparison has gone some way to helping you decide. So there we are, that's it from me for now. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and ring that bell before you go. And if you like the content on this channel and you'd like to support it, you can do that at patreon.com/Zenography. As ever, thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you soon for some more Zenography.